Hey, Jonathan here. Tim Dietrich and Eric Grubaugh had me on their show, SuiteScript Stories, which is for NetSuite developers, and they were kind enough to let me repost it here. Both folks are in my Ditcherville community, but Tim has been following me for years, all the way back to the FileMaker days, so he has some really interesting questions to ask. And I think this might just be part one of perhaps a multi-part series. On to the episode.
Welcome back to SuiteScript Stories. My name is Eric Grubaugh, and I am joined, as always, by my enigmatic co-host, Tim Dietrich. How's it going, Tim?
Pretty good. You didn't let me down on the adjective again.
Gotta have a new one every time.
Yeah.
And today we have a guest that neither of us can wait to bring on the show, so we're not going to wait. Jonathan Stark is a former software developer who is on a mission to rid the world of hourly billing. He is the author of Hourly Billing is Nuts, the host of Ditching Hourly, and he writes a daily newsletter on pricing for independent professionals. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
And you and Tim both sort of have a little shared history. You cut your teeth in the FileMaker Pro platform. So I'm just going to pass the torch over to him to kind of bring us into the conversation.
Yeah. So Jonathan, I think I first became aware of what you were doing at the time, all the way back in, I think it was 2005. At the time, you and I were both developers working in the FileMaker space. You had started, I think, to really specialize in FileMaker web integration, and we're doing a lot of interesting stuff with PHP, which I found enormously helpful. Your first book came out, I looked it up, it was 2007, and that was my Bible. Like, it was for the longest time, like the only book I've ever had where I didn't even feel bad that it was falling apart because I was just constantly looking at it.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it was and I think it helped a lot of people in the space. We met in person. You probably don't remember, but it was a FileMaker developer conference in San Diego, and I went back to look it up. It was 2013, and I think you had started to make your sort of transition from being a developer to what you're kind of doing today. You feeling your way through value pricing and all that stuff. I think you presented there. And so at the end of the day, things were settling down. I go to ride up in the elevator, and you were on the elevator. Either you got in right after me or right before me, whatever. And, I do this podcast and I blog all the time. I'm probably one of the shyest people you'd ever met. So it's totally out of character for me to introduce myself to you, but I did. I'm like, just do it. Because I was a huge fan of yours back then. So I said, I introduced myself and I told you, thanks for everything you're doing. And I think you said something like, how's business going? And at the time it was crazy, what you and I were doing back then was in high demand. I couldn't keep up with it. And that's what I said to you. I'm like, I'm under all this pressure to hire people to keep up with the demand. And you said something like, it's your business. Like, you don't have to hire people if you don't want to. And that's what I just needed to hear that because it's like, that's the default advice from everybody. Oh, just hire
advice. Yeah.
So that's when I first met you. We've met a few times since then. Like, you came to a conference that was in Norfolk, which is about an hour or 2 hours from me. And we had a chance to catch that. It was years ago, but I have followed you every minute since you left the FileMaker world. I don't know that I've listened.
Able to fit out the door.
But I mean, seriously, you've been influential and massively influential. And I mentioned you in a podcast that Eric and I did late last year where we were recapping the year. And I was talking about changes I had to make to my business because of struggling to deal with this whole chronic fatigue mess, and how it's changing over to away from hourly, and just reading everything you've written about positioning. And it just helped me immensely. So it's a long-winded way to say thank you for everything that you've done, both for me and the community. And I'm so grateful that you're here. So thank you.
Super nice to hear, and I'm glad it's helped, all this typing. But yeah, that's super nice. Thanks for saying that.
Thank you. So you want to pick it up? Well, I was going to say, please. Our careers, I think, up until the point that you left the FileMaker world, our careers were very similar in terms of we had been in the FileMaker space for a while. You had written the book. You were, I think, ready to do the next thing. And mobile was, I think, hot at the time. And there was a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
You went down this path that you're on today, which we're going to talk about. And I stayed tech. Like I'm a developer. I'm like a fish out of water if I'm not writing code. Right? I don't ever want to not be writing code. So that's where our careers kind of diverged. But we're here to talk today about what you've been doing ever since then. And it's a lot, I think. But Eric, I'm going to let you take it from here. So.
Oh, sure. I think you mentioned, Tim, your transition out of hourly billing. And Jonathan, that's your mission, right? Getting rid of hourly billing. What was your transition like? You talk a lot about the moments where the light bulb turns on or all the pieces fall into place. What was yours that sort of was the first step on this journey?
Yeah, I had a really clear epiphany type moment when back in the FileMaker days, I was a developer at this firm and things happened and I got promoted to a VP role. And in that role, I got a sort of higher level view of the business than I had as a developer. And one of the things that I was doing was one-on-ones and salary reviews. So I knew how much money everyone was making. And I also knew how much we were billing. I was involved with all of the money aspects all of a sudden. Right. And one day it just occurred to me that we were making way more money off of our most junior developer than off of our best developer. And I spent I was just sort of like puzzled by that. I was like, no, I'm thinking wrong. There's something wrong. Right. I must be wrong because why? Because the implication of that is that you should get rid of all of your good developers and get all junior developers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's definitely wrong. I knew that was definitely wrong, but I was like, but wait a second, we're not supposed to be in business to lose money. And the better our developers get, the smaller our profits get, like approaching zero. So it was just, I sort of saw it as sort of a mathematical equation that was clearly pointing in one direction, which was down.
Right.
And I puzzled over that for like 2 weeks before I even thought to consider our business model. Right. And I was like, oh, it's hourly. If we gave fixed prices, instantly all the financial incentives would be aligned. And the better developers you had, the more quickly you could finish big projects at a high level of quality and be super profitable because then, yes, their salary is maybe twice as high as the junior developers. But if you can crank out great stuff, if you can delight clients faster, which is what you need the really good 10x developers for. If you can delight clients faster and deliver more value more quickly, you have to give fixed prices. Otherwise, you're just, the faster they get, the less you make. So, and it was in that role as a manager where I recognized it because I suddenly went from not knowing anything about the money flowing through the organization to knowing how all the money flowed through the organization. Mm-hmm. But it's also true for individuals. It might even be more true, to coin a phrase, for individual developers because, of course, because you're not going to fire yourself and hire a junior instead, almost for sure. So it leads to Tim's experience, which is the better you get, the less money you make. So the more you have to work, it's just a trap. I mean, it's a trap.
Golden handcuffs.
Right. It just hourly billing punishes expertise. So, it rewards, I don't want to say amateurs, but yeah, it basically rewards you for being slow.
Yep. And you have no incentive to get better or faster. Your clients want things faster, right?
Always. Yes.
Your incentives are misaligned. If you give them a choice, do you want it in 6 months or 3 months? What are they going to choose? 3 months every time.
Every time.
So yeah, immediately all your incentives are off.
Right.
After that, what was did you try to start transitioning the business then, in your role? What was the next sort of step in the journey of getting away from hourly?
Yeah, I did not do that. I went to the owner and I said what I just told you guys. Mm-hmm. And he said, I understand what you're saying in theory, but what would we do instead? And I had absolutely no answer for that question. I was like, I knew fixed prices was the answer, like a non-hourly, you're just not trading time for money. I knew it was fixed prices somehow, but we had dabbled in that and gotten roasted in the past because, just like, wow, we would have made way more off this project if we had done it hourly. We underestimated the level of effort. The client pulled the scope all over the place. So I was like, well, it can't, it's got to be some kind of fixed prices, but we've been killed by that before. So, I didn't know what the answer was. And at the time, I think there were probably 10 developers, maybe a few other admin type employees. And I was not about, and every single one of them had a mortgage. And I was not about to take all 10 or 12 of those people on some roller coaster ride of me figuring out how to price our projects differently. So we just parted ways amicably. We're still friends to this day, and went on my own to figure it out. That's basically what happened. And that was in 2006. I officially incorporated on January 1st, 2006.
Right. We got almost 20 years coming up real quick.
Pretty close.
Sorry, should I not have said that?
Just getting grayer and grayer.
Then I guess what was the first, this is another thing we share a lot over in your Slack channel, is wins. What was the first win like in that journey? What happened next? Where was the next big moment?
Mm-hmm. So, there's a couple. The first thing that popped to mind was I switched over to something called value-based pricing. And I learned about that from a book by Alan Weiss called Value-Based Fees. And that book became my Bible for years. And it's just chock-a-block full of great information. Not all of it applies to software developers that well, but a lot of it does. And so that was my answer to the question, what do I do instead? And I did it poorly at first. And
don't we all?
Yeah, it's really hard to switch your mindset to a scope last kind of mentality. But it was so powerful that still my first year was incredible in two obvious ways. The most obvious way is that I something like doubled my salary in the first year, which isn't exactly apples to apples because it's revenue versus salary, but still my income was way up. And the other thing which I didn't expect, but was tangible, very palpable, was that my clients all chilled way out because every time I talked to them or there was some interaction or something took me longer than predicted, they weren't freaking out because it wasn't money coming out of their bank account. It was my problem.
Right.
So that was, so the relationships became so much more relaxed. Because a lot of times when clients have a deadline and they're putting this deadline pressure on you, it's not actually deadline pressure. It's actually budgetary pressure. Because when the time and the money are essentially the same, then they want it done faster for two reasons. One, because the opportunity cost and they want to start using the software. The other one is that every month that goes by, it costs them more and more and more and more, and they're not getting the benefit. So it was wild how quickly everybody, it's not like they were all stressed out all the time, but I could feel it. There was a huge difference in the demeanor of the clients once they started to get comfortable with this. Oh, wow. It's like, we're not getting invoices. We're not getting this horrible surprise at the end of every month or week where it's like, oh, woof, that was way more than I expected. That was way more than I expected. And we're only, we're 90% done, 90% to go. So that was great. That was the second thing. And the third thing was this was instantaneous. Like those things revealed themselves over the course of the first year, but this third one was instantaneous, which was the moment I started on my first fixed price project, I felt like every hour or minute I worked, I was losing money, which was the opposite feeling I had before where I'd like code. I was having fun coding, right? Tim's super fun. Like, I love doing this. And then I'd look up at the clock like 2 hours later and be like, I just made $300 having a ball, Now I'm coding. And I look at the clock and it's 3 hours have gone by. And like, that's $300 I lost. Because if I could have done that in 1 minute and moved on to the next thing and finished more quickly. And that was when I realized that even though I swear in my heart of hearts, I never dragged my feet on a project ever. Subconsciously, you do, because your brain just doesn't think about these things that are going to cost you money. It just doesn't.
Right. You might not have been dragging your feet, but you have no incentive to get better. You're not thinking about like, how can I do this quicker next time? What patterns, what systems can I start building to make me faster? Because if I get faster, I lose money. And now, again, back to those misaligned incentives.
Right. There's even a bigger thing. There's a bigger thing that your brain doesn't think of. Because people listening to this a lot of software developers I've worked with over the years, they are real systems thinkers and they can't help themselves but create boilerplate because they're bored of doing that stuff and they can't help themselves but create tools. but it's punishing them financially to do that because it takes the time to build it and then it makes them do their job faster. So it's a negative incentive and it leads to the trap. But one thing that I've never met anyone who has done was on one of my really early projects, I quoted a big feature. I quoted a big feature for an existing piece of software, and this was still FileMaker. And I, gave the price. And then I sat down to do the work and I was like, ooh, man, now that I'm up to my elbows in code, this is going to be 2 or 3 times longer. This is going to be hard and not in a fun way. And,
right.
And since I was going to make X for it, I don't know, let's say it was $10,000. If I was going to make X for it, it was going to take me a month instead of what I would have guessed as like, say, 2 weeks. Then I was like, oh, and I swear it was like someone else's voice from the back of my head said, I wonder if there's a plugin that'll do this. And I would have never in my life had that thought before a situation like this. And guess what? For $700, I bought a plugin that was the feature. And I said to the client, hey, I found this plugin. It's $700, does exactly what you want. Instead of me building the whole thing from scratch, I'll just configure it and integrate it into your thing. And I'll take the $700 out of my fee or whatever, but I'll license the thing to you. Or I can't remember how there's a little bit of not shenanigans, but there's a little bit of complication.
Negotiations.
Him being the owner of it, but it coming out of my money and whatever. It was a little bit weird, but it was nothing. It was no big deal.
Right.
But the takeaway from that was like, I cannot tell you how weird it was when that thought entered my head. I didn't know where it came from. It was like another person was whispering in my ear. There's got to be a plugin for that because it wasn't the weirdest feature in the world. It just wasn't something that came in FileMaker. It was pretty common elsewhere. So I'm like, someone must have needed this. But in a million years, I wouldn't have had that thought if I was getting paid by the hour.
Yeah, you would have wrote it yourself, right?
Yeah, totally.
Finding a plugin would have been the last thing you would have probably done. Yeah.
Tim, I'm going to kick it to you.
Yeah. So we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, which is that, we both work in the NetSuite space and it's, made up of larger consulting firms, freelancers, soloists, but hourly billing is the thing, right? It's the standard billing model. I don't even think I'd be willing to bet that almost everyone that works in this space never even stops to question, like, should we be doing this? I think they probably feel the pain of it. But
they probably don't even attribute that pain to it. It's several degrees removed.
It is.
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
It's true. That's a great point. The symptoms are one thing. I had all the symptoms. As soon as I saw the root cause, all the symptoms connected. I'm like, oh, these are all from that root cause.
Right. So I think the question that I'm trying getting to is, have you ever run into that before where you've found like whatever you want to call the NetSuite space, the platform, whatever, an entire community where it was so, prevalent, the hourly billing, and how do you go about changing? And it's like, have you figured that out yet? Have you
one
had
developer at a time?
One client at a time.
Yeah. It's an epidemic across the entire professional services space. There's some that have weird, like there's some outliers that do different things, like copywriters that charge by the word. It's a similar kind of input that is irrelevant to the outcome. But generally speaking, I don't know what the percentages are, but professional services in general, I mean, it's hard to find people who aren't doing hourly billing. Yeah. So it's no surprise. And they all think, well, that's what our clients expect. And it's like, clients hate being billed by the hour.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that Eric and I were talking about earlier before you had even joined, which is that I was thinking about that today and just, NetSuite in particular. And it occurred to me that, the one way to sort of have a sea change as far as how we bill is to just educate developers and consulting firms and so on. And then it occurred to me that what if you actually went to the other side and you started to educate the companies that are engaging with those, whether it's individuals or development firms, and said to them, hey, maybe you should ask, have you run into that? And does that work? Does it help?
I have had that exact thought. Like, what if I spent some time, or what if someone was spending some time educating the buy side of the market?
Right.
And I'm not sure. It's tough to say. I think it's an interesting idea. It's not obvious to me how to do it, but it feels like what I would want to say, my message to that group of people who are buying professional services and paying by the hour is like, just demand a price. Mm-hmm. Everything you buy, almost without exception, you know how much it is before you decide. The one exception are these big projects where you've got, at least one person, but sometimes teams of people on the clock, and they won't give you a price. It's insanity. And yet that is the way that, it's irrational for sure. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, their price is $150 an hour. It's like, that's not a price. That's like asking for a price to have your garage re-roofed and then telling you how much shingles are. It doesn't make any sense. Right. It's like not enough. It doesn't make sense. And yet it's like this collective hallucination in the market for professional services that is unusual. I mean, when I buy stuff, I'll pay hourly if it's silly low, because even if the person is off by 10x, I still would have paid the amount, right? But for anything expensive, where you're getting up there, like this is going to take a couple of months and this person charges a couple $100 an hour, I'm going to demand a price for results.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why anyone wouldn't do that. I mean, I guess I understand because that's what everyone does, but it's weird.
Indoctrination.
Yeah, it's weird. That's just the way it's always been. Therefore, it's the only way, or that's the right way.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that if you were hiring me today to help you get going on NetSuite, and I gave you an hourly rate, and you came back to me and said, I need a fixed fee or whatever, right? Just give me the price. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't know enough. Well, that's kind of a red flag right there, right? We haven't scoped it out well enough and if we continue to kind of go back and forth and the requirements get better and better, and I continue to see, well, I still, at some point, your confidence in me is going to diminish. You'll be like, has this guy ever done this before? Are we in uncharted territory? I think it's just something to think about if you are on the buy side and you're, trying to get to that sort of flat price.
Right. Well, the thing, to me, like I said, I don't know how I would tackle that. I don't know like what industry I would go at, because I feel like I would want to go industry by industry and like mm-hmm. pick ones that I relate to who are regularly spending a lot of money. But at the same time, I think it's probably as effective to do the other way around, or certainly I'm more effective at it the other way around, where when you present, if I convince someone, like a developer, to try to value price a project, and it's not just a question of like giving a fixed price instead of giving an hourly estimate. There's like a series of things that are important to have in a proposal like this. There's a process to go through to generate a truly value-based proposal. But assuming you do all of those things, when you put that in front of a client regularly, when I teach students how to do this and we go through it and we craft the proposal and give it to the buyer, it is very common for the buyer to say, this is the best proposal I've ever read. And yes, let's do this right now. Like, we're not even going to consider any of the other people, because everyone else is just presenting the buyer with this massive risk. They're basically saying, write me a blank check and I'll let you know when I'm done. And one of my people comes along and is like, it's going to be this much. I'm going to do these things, but the benefits of those things for you are X, Y, and Z. And that's what we're focused on. Mm-hmm. The scope will probably change. We might solve these problems differently once we get in there, but the outcome is, name the business outcome that they want. Improved revenue, improved morale, increased revenue, increased profitability, better conversion rate on the website. Like, they want some number to improve.
Yep.
And if you focus your proposal on that number that they want improved, and then you give them a price for your contribution to that transformation or that improvement, you're going to be like, these days, since not everyone does it, you're going to be like ahead of the field. They're going to be like, whoa, because everyone else can be talking about the ERD is going to look like this, and these are going to be the names of the tables, and these are going to be the fields in the tables, and just like 40 pages of spec. And then I promise I'll do all this spec. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it'll take at least 5 months, maybe 10. And if you're the buyer, it's like agreeing, it's like agreeing, I don't know, to buy a house without knowing how much it's going to be. And you're on the hook no matter what. It's like, okay, because halfway through the build, the costs are still going up. And it's like, well, I decided to live here. I can't, there's a sunk cost problem. If they change horses in the middle, of the race. This is a horrible situation for clients.
Yeah.
So they love this alternative.
Yeah. It's a differentiator, right?
Indeed. Right now. Hopefully someday it won't be.
Right. You'll have to, you have to find some better way to stand out.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue into another area that you're kind of known for, which is positioning. And we mentioned Hourly Billing is Nuts. I think that was your first sort of business-oriented book. Yeah. Prior to that, it had been technical books that you had written. So you had written some on FileMaker, iOS, and Android. But one of the other books that you've written, and I've got all of your books, is Pigeonhole Yourself, which kind of brings up the whole subject of positioning and how to differentiate yourself from your competitors. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? What's the shortest definition of positioning that you can give us?
Yeah. So
positioning statement for positioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. The elevator pitch. Positioning is just strategic level marketing. It's a high level marketing, almost business strategy level. It's very high level. And basically what it boils down to is a way to make your product, service, or business more memorable in the minds of your ideal buyers. So it's a way to articulate who you help with what and why you're different. That's going to stick in people's minds, and you're going to own that spot. So when somebody thinks, I got to do something about this hourly billing, my name is just going to pop into their heads. They're going to be like, oh, the ditching hourly guy. Or they're going to ask someone, what should I do? And it's going to pop into somebody else's head that they asked. And you're just going to get this massive amount of referrals. And it's just amazingly powerful. So like if anybody listening has been, it's like, geez, I hear I should be blogging, or I hear I should have a mailing list, or I hear I should have a podcast, or I hear I should be active on social media. And somehow magic happens, and that's going to lead to clients. And if you're listening to this and you've been trying that stuff and it doesn't seem to work at all, I can almost guarantee you have a positioning problem. Because if you don't have a clear positioning, all that stuff just doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't come across as a cohesive thing. And it's just this soggy mess coming at them. And they sort of kind of know you do this or that, but like, what's in it for me? Like who, or what's in it for whom, And if you have a really clear, crystal clear, laser focused positioning statement, you can really break that. And when people nail it, they just tell me like, it's like, they use the same phrase every time. It's like magic. Like all of a sudden my mailing list like quadrupled. I changed my headline on LinkedIn and people are literally calling me out of the blue, so it's hard. It's hard to find one that gets traction. It takes some experimentation usually, but sometimes people just like slam dunk it right away and it has immediate measurable results.
It makes it so much easier your side too, because now like if you're blogging or social media, whatever you're doing, and you don't know who you're writing to, writing is so much harder. That blank page is like, what do I even do with this? But if you know who you're writing to specifically, everything gets easier to at least produce, right?
100%.
You know who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, what pain you're trying to solve for them. Everything gets easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I first learned that before I really knew anything about marketing other than just like copying people who appeared to be doing something right. When I was writing books, especially probably my most popular book was that iPhone book. And I remember writing that and I was really getting in the weeds with like what level of detail to include in the book. Like, do I need to explain how to like click and drag? Like that's sort of an exaggeration, but like how much, like what pre-knowledge can I assume in the reader? And I think it was my editor at the time. I could be wrong. It might have been the previous book, but one of my editors was like, well, pick a person and write the book for them. And I did that. And I picked someone who's like really one of my sisters. I was like, really smart, Ivy League degree, but not technical at all. So, knows how to use a computer. I knew all of these things. All of a sudden, all these questions were answered. And, to your point, it was incredible how much easier it was to write. Cause I just imagine I was writing it for Tari and it was like, boom. And it just like flows out. It's so much easier. Same goes for, content marketing or business writing or B2B podcasts or anything like that. If you don't know who your buyer is, just to use an example, if you don't know who your target market is or who your ideal buyer is, or your ideal customer, then you don't know what words to use. Like, should I say client or guest or patient or buyer? Because if you're doctors, lawyers, hoteliers, hospitality, you don't know what words to use. So what do? You blur them up and you say, maybe you say buyer, maybe you say customer in general. But if a doctor reads that, they're like, I don't have customers, I have patients. So right away, you're making your stuff soggy. Instead of, if you just pick doctors, I'm going to help podiatrists who are out of network pack their schedule. It's like, okay, now I can talk about podiatry and all the language from that world, whether it's about their business and their tail insurance or things that are specific to doctors that other people would just be like, I don't know what that is. It's like jargon. It's Greek to everybody else except for your target market. And it identifies you as an insider or allows you to write copy that just crackles with it. They're just like laugh. It's so like you nail them. You're like, they're so like, oh boy,
you read my mind.
I know myself. You read my mind.
Yeah.
I was laughing so hard when I read your sales page. I showed it to my co-founder. Yeah.
Right. I think in some interviews and podcasts that I've heard that you've done, I think you've mentioned that sometimes people will say to whoever it is that's well positioned that it's as if, you were reading my mind. And there's no question that they want to work with you, right? They're pre-qualified by the time they reach out to you. They're sold on you. It's just the formality of closing the deal at that point.
Yeah.
So that's positioning. And Eric and I have talked about that in some of our other episodes about how in the NetSuite space, it's an ERP. So it does everything for a business. It's running on it. But that there's a lot of opportunity to specialize in the NetSuite space and position yourself as an expert in just the tightest little area that you want. Some of the ones that we have mentioned in previous episodes are things like revenue recognition, integration and stuff like that. And there are people who love that stuff, right? And they've, if you're a specialist in that, I think you're going to get some business. So I've heard you talk about this before, but I think our audience would probably enjoy hearing about it. When you do pick like something to specialize in, I think there's this fear that it's too tight, right? You've narrowed it down too much. Can you talk a little about that? Because I love how you describe this pride. It's not really a problem, but it's this fear. So
Sure. Yes, the fear, the position of fear reflex. So there are three big fears that come with the niching down thing or the pigeonholing yourself or whatever term you want to use, specializing in some way. And the first one is that I won't get enough business because they're like, well, right now I'm getting practically no leads. I'm getting maybe a couple of referrals every few months. I'm able to close them 80% of the time I get on the phone with them, but it's really scary that they just randomly come in and I don't have any control over it. And when I do have a famine cycle, there's nothing to do. I just have to spam people, be like, hey, do you need any NetSuite stuff done? So they can't imagine that by narrowing down on either a specific skill or area of the platform or a particular kind of industry or buyer or type of person that they want to help, they can't imagine that narrowing the focus is going to do anything but decrease the number of leads they're already not getting, But, it's a myth, though. The absolute opposite happens for the reasons I listed earlier, because you become the one and only instead of just one of many. So there's all of a sudden your competition disappears and you're getting this, call it a Rolodex moment. You're getting like Rolodex moments on steroids, because if you're so well known for a particular thing, and it's easy to remember, then when somebody needs that thing, all they have to do is talk to someone who's heard of you vaguely. Like, it doesn't even have to be a past client or anything. It could be someone in your network. It could be your family. And they just overhear this conversation of like, oh, we just switched over to NetSuite there's actually a store right near me that switched over to NetSuite about, I think it was last year. And who did I think of? I thought of Tim.
Right.
Tim's like the NetSuite guy that I know. And, obviously there are others, but I've known Tim for so long that like it's just stuck in there. And that's not even that specialized. It's a platform specialization. But inside of the community, I'm sure NetSuite has something like partners, whatever, certified, blah, blah, blah. And that's all fine. But there's still probably a ton of competition there. It's probably very generalist. It's nothing wrong with having it, but if you do have it, that doesn't really make you just one of many. I mean, it makes you not the one and only. You're just one of many certified NetSuite developers or whatever. So you got to go farther than that. And it's a credibility indicator and it sort of projects expertise and that sort of thing. But if you do something super specific, like, tax calculations outside of the US, for shipped goods into the US, like something insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it sounds so incredibly specific that it seems impossible that there'd be enough people to do it, to hire you for it. You're probably just flat out wrong. I remember talking about this. I think it was at a FileMaker conference, and I know it was in Las Vegas because I was on stage talking about this. And the night before, just out of curiosity, I was like, I wonder how many dentists there are in walking distance of this hotel. And then in the audience, I quizzed them, like, how many dentists do you think are in walking distance from this hotel? And people guessed, and they were off by a factor of 10. I mean, there are so many more people in the world than you think. It's like, it's incredible how, because I work with people to niche down their target markets all the time, or even they're specializing in their skills. I do it all the time, and they're just routinely blown away when they go deep enough. It's like it's like you have this sense that there's a ton of businesses out there that you could probably help, but you don't really know. And then when you drill down, I can kind of tell when somebody's about to strike oil, because they're drilling down, and all of a sudden a whole world opens up to them. So like they feel like it's like feeling like you're on the outside of a club or a restaurant or something. You're on the outside and you're trying to find your way in, and you can hear stuff going on in there, but you don't really know what it is. And you're still using all this blurry language and soggy messaging and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you finally find a way in, and it's something, usually it's comically more specific than what they were planning on. But then all of the questions that I've been asking them to try and answer about their ideal buyers or whatever, all of a sudden, all the answers start falling into place. They're like, oh, it wasn't just, I don't know, like ESG consultants. People are like, well, what are ESG consultants? And they're like, equity, I can't even remember, equity something in governance. And then I'm like, okay, I guess, yes, that's a term. Not really familiar with it. Do they have a conference? Well, sort of. And like, well, are there different kinds of ESG consultants? Oh yeah. And there's like 10 different kinds of ESG consultants. And I'm like, okay, well, which one do you think is the one you'd like to help the most? Like, which ones do you like the most? Oh, the DEI consultants, which is like a niche of a niche of a niche.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like, oh, I know what to write. I know what to do on LinkedIn. I know who to reach out to. I know what conferences I should try and speak at. I know what podcasts I should go on, because they were operating at this level where they could kind of see that something was going on down there, but couldn't really tell what it was. And then they kind of get boots on the ground somewhere, and they're like, oh, okay. Now I can answer all those questions that Stark's been peppering me with. Yeah. And then they can go off and explore that. And it doesn't always work the very first time. You might have to go deeper. You might have to go up a level. You might have to go adjacent. But all of a sudden, a light bulb comes on, and that, this is me answering your first question about, or my first fear in response to your question. The first fear is that there aren't going to be enough people, and the metaphor everyone uses is like, why would I just fish with a fishing pole when I could cast a wide net? That's what everybody says when I suggest that they niche down. And my answer is, you've got the metaphor wrong. It's not the net that's big; it's the ocean.
Right.
So if you're trying to sell to everyone, you're really selling to no one. And again, this is another thing I'll ask an audience. Like, how many fish do you think are in the sea? Wild guess, anybody?
I have billions. I have no idea.
So scientists estimate like 3.5 trillion fish are in the sea.
Order of magnitude off.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you fish in the sea, Jonathan Stark? Why wouldn't I fish in the sea? I'd be like, because you don't have a net. You have a fishing pole. So yes.
And that doesn't change, right?
That doesn't change. The net is Nike buying a Super Bowl ad. That's a net. And they're trying to catch as many fish out of the ocean as they can. You don't have that. No one listening to this has a net. So don't think I'm asking you to throw away your net and grab your fishing pole. You only have a fishing pole. So would you rather dunk that fishing pole into the Atlantic Ocean in hopes of feeding your family that night? Or would you rather dunk that fishing pole into a barrel full of trout? And there's only 1,000 trout in the barrel, and there are 3.5 trillion fish in the sea. But the trout are right there. They're jumping out of the barrel practically. And you know what bait to use if you even needed to use bait. And because trout and mackerel and tuna, probably all different bait. So it's like, boom, which would you pick? And it's like, it's the difference. Yes. If you target trout instead of every fish in the sea, you are targeting a smaller group, but your effectiveness to reach those people just astronomically improves.
Yeah.
So that's myth number one dispelled up there, because there's two more.
Well, you brought up the phrase platform specialization, and I wanted to ask you about that because obviously, the people that are listening to this podcast are, I would think, are all working in some capacity in the NetSuite space and on the NetSuite platform.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started doing work in the NetSuite space, I think one of the first things I put myself down as is just sort of a NetSuite developer. Then I was a NetSuite integration specialist, which is getting tighter and tighter. There's, we were talking about this before the show. There's 37,000 companies roughly, I think, maybe more than that now, running on NetSuite. And I feel like when I first started doing this stuff, I thought, there's my barrel, right? But then I realized it's not a barrel. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, I think, so what you were saying really resonates with me because I feel like either I can continue to drill down on a certain type of service that I can offer, or I can drill down on a specific type of company that's running on NetSuite, right? Like pick an industry or whatever. So there's different ways to specialize on a platform. So I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about that? Have you seen that sort of platform specialization play out with things like Shopify? Are there what would your advice be to somebody like me or to a developer who's going down this path?
Sure. So let's define it first. So a platform specialization is basically when you advertise yourself as having a skill in something your buyer knows they need. So if your skill was I usually use the example of optimizing MySQL search queries. Your ideal buyer almost definitely does not know what that is. And they certainly don't know that they need it, or if they don't need it, or they probably don't even know what database they're using in their business. So that is I would call that a horizontal specialization. We don't need to get into all the terminology, but just to put platform specialization in context. And then sort of what I would generally broadly call a vertical specialization is when you specialize in solving a particular kind of buyer's problems. So you can actually be more of a generalist in your skill set. You're not hyper focused on just optimizing MySQL search queries, but you increase the number of leads that are donations that animal shelters get. And you might have 100 different skills that you use, from software development to UX, UI, marketing. There might be 1 million. You might be a very well-rounded, call it jack of all trades, but you can actually use those. You can use all of those skills by focusing really on who you help with what. Platform specialization is kind of in the middle of these two things, where you've got this skill that it's the kind of thing you'd put on your resume. These certifications in NetSuite, and I've got this much experience with NetSuite, and I do these kinds of things. Maybe there's different kinds of SuiteScript. Maybe there's other kind of scripting you can do. So there are all these things that you could do inside of NetSuite. And the difference between horizontal and vertical specialization with platform is, like I said, the buyer, probably the owner of the business that you're going to talk to, or at least the head of a big division or department, they know they have NetSuite, and they probably, their butt is probably on the line because they were probably the one that advocated for it in the first place. This is totally true of FileMaker too. So, they know they have FileMaker. They know they have NetSuite. The people who are in charge of writing checks to people like us know they have this thing that you're good at. So that is the difference. And it's really, it's a very attractive way to position yourself because it's so easy, because the platform does all the marketing. They're always bigger than you. They have huge marketing teams. They're happy to amplify your message because it just makes their ecosystem look bigger. It does make the ecosystem bigger. So so it's great. There's a lot of upsides to it. The downsides are that your fortunes rise and fall with the platform. So if it goes out of style, I immediately think of Flash developers. If it goes out of style, especially overnight, like Flash did, you're dead. So, when the platform's on the rise, you're printing money. When it's going down, everybody that has that same specialization, now they're fighting for scraps. So in this particular case, the platform specialization early on, when it's still new, it's fine to just be like, I'm a NetSuite person, because there's not a million NetSuite people. Or Notion. I saw it happen with Notion a couple of years ago. If you said you knew how Notion worked, or you could set somebody up in Notion, it was like your phone was ringing off the hook. I don't think that's true anymore with Notion. And from what you're saying, it's not true anymore with NetSuite. So it could be that the market is growing so fast that it is still true, but regardless of what the platform is. But once you get to it, once it sort of the S curve starts to flatten out, Then you get these subspecializations like you were describing. And when it really flattens out, people are going to be heading for the exits.
Yeah.
So, and if everyone leaves and you're the last one standing, then your business can actually come back up because the competition has all gone away. So I've seen that.
Looking at you, COBOL developers.
Yeah, 100%. That's always my example. Right.
Yeah.
So like anybody that's left running COBOL really needs COBOL developers. But yeah, that's a great example. So I don't know if I answered the whole question though, but the platform specialization thing, it has this, when it reaches maturity and sort of an equilibrium where the customer base and the developer base is kind of growing at the same rate, then the subspecializations can start to kick in.
Yeah. I have a feeling that's where we are with the NetSuite space. Eric, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely, I would say, starting to flatten out. There's way more partners now. There's way more people like producing content, about NetSuite. There's a Slack channel for NetSuite developers that has like 5x'd in the past 2 or 3 years.
Okay,
it's huge, right? And what that now means is there are just so many soggy, as you put it, websites. We are a NetSuite consulting firm who solves hard problems with smart people for whatever, no specificity, nothing at all, just all a bunch of generalists. Mm. So I'm curious about whether it's with positioning, whether it's value-based pricing, making this transition. I know you work with independent professionals a lot. Can you take this to the agency, to the firm as well? Does this work in that setting, or is it like, what obstacles are there for that transition?
Of getting off hourly specifically, or positioning? Yeah,
positioning, either one. We're talking about positioning, so definitely there, but I'd say both.
So the positioning fears, in my experience, are always greater at the agency level because the costs are they're almost, anybody that would be considering this that has a positioning problem, their profit margin is probably too thin. And that's probably why they would consider it in the first place, because the profitability, they're just like breaking even, or their growth is just totally flat, and it has been for years. And they're sort of like, the status quo is the devil, and they're just terrified to mess it up. So there's a lot more fear. The fear is just amplified. It's probably direct, factor of number of employees. It's like the more employees you have, the more scary it is, because you're just really betting the farm. But there's
lots of people's farms.
Lots of people's farms, right? So yeah, you're betting the farm that people are what is it called? Crop debt. I want to say crop dusting, but anyway, stupid metaphor. So what you need to do, whether you're running a firm or not, is do experiments to increase your confidence that this is the right move. So you could start a separate website and just a whole separate marketing around a particular service. So you don't have to position the whole company. If you're nervous about it, you don't want to bet the farm. You can create a specific service for a specific kind of buyer, and maybe you have that buried in your website somewhere. Maybe it's on your homepage. Maybe it's on a completely different website, and you just promote it separately, and it's like powered by agency name. And maybe it's a product. So you can do you can do an experiment to convince yourself that, wow, this really works. Like, holy moly, this really works.
Yeah.
And like I said, it doesn't it's not landing on the right positioning it can be really hard. It can be, let me put it like this. The journey to a positioning statement that gets traction, there's always surprises. It's almost never what you think it's going to be. And it's almost never the words that you thought. It's almost always more specific than you were planning. But then when you crack through and you get into that sort of, you land on the ground where all these people are, then all of a sudden you can feel it instantly when it clicks. Right away. You can feel it right away when it clicks. I'm not saying you suddenly are rich, but all of a sudden people are contacting you. Like, you see a big uptick in people reaching out, people inviting you on. Like I said before, all these people start reaching out, responding to your LinkedIn posts, DMing you, calling you, emailing you, referring you. So you get invited. The big one is getting invited to speak somewhere, because whoever's organizing that thing, you have somehow built up enough trust with them that they're willing to risk their reputation a little bit by presenting you. Well, you guys are doing it right now. Like, you guys are risking your reputation that I'm going to come in here and not be an idiot. So, right. So So you can tell when it starts to work because that stuff, those invitations, and it's just like outreach starts coming. You get inbound for the first time, inbound leads.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing with the agency model is that agency owners, and I almost never work with agency owners, but I do know from some experience that they're almost always obsessed with employee utilization. And you have to forget about that if you're going to switch. So the flip is, and this is the first question that comes up. It's like, well, how do I incentivize my employees in this model or whatever? And it's like, if you have to stop worrying about making sure they're busy all the time and just making sure they're producing results all the time. And if it takes Bob a weekend to delight a client with some feature that you were thinking was going to take him a month, then like he's got a month off. Like forget about it. Forget about Bob. You thought he was going to be busy the whole time anyway. If he came out with a way to judo move this thing and it like, whoa, that was great, then the incentives are aligned for the employees to deliver more beneficial outcomes to the clients more quickly, because then they get a day off or a week off. And for an agency owner's heads explode when I say this, because they're just so used to like, but I'm paying Bob this monthly salary. Like it is time and material, it is like trading time for money, because every month goes by and I have to give Bob $20,000. And it's like, yeah, but if you look at it like that, you're going to be trying really hard to keep Bob busy. And that doesn't mean Bob's providing value. There's so many places to hide when you're an employee and you're going to get paid no matter what. And you can prove that you're busy. I mean, you're looking at a guy that built a time tracking system in 2003 for my employer. So like, I know what they're not called lie sheets for no reason.
Yeah.
They're not time sheets, they're lie sheets. So there's just too many places to hide. If you let them just like, oh, this is what you told me to do. And I did it. And geez, it took me longer than I thought, but I did it. You owe me my salary. That's an approach. People do it. It works. Managers descend and account people and project managers, and like everything's like get the employee productivity up. But the problem to me, in my opinion, is that the financial incentives aren't aligned.
Right.
So if you did stop worrying about utilization and start saying, and I've had clients that were like this and bosses that were like this, that were like, I don't care when you work or how much you work, but I need this done by this date. Can you do it for this much money? Just implied, because there's a monthly.
Right.
So I need this done by this date. Can you do it? Yeah, sure. And now the pressure's on me to execute. And the faster I execute well and delight the client with this release, whatever it is, the more time I get off to go do something else or start a side project or practice martial arts. Yeah. So when it does work, it definitely works, but it's such a huge mind flip for agency owners.
Well,
there.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I'm watching the clock here. We've only got a few minutes left with you here, but
I told you I was going to talk too much.
No.
Well, we told you we could talk for hours.
Positioning fears, but yeah, we'll have to do a part two.
Yeah, Tim, I'll let you go first because I want to transition us into wrapping up, and maybe there's a part two continuation here, Jonathan.
So I was going to say, I think for me, and Eric, I think you probably went through this too. I think anybody who goes out on their own, especially when you still have the hourly billing mindset, you feel like you need to be working all the time, and that's this, if I'm not billing 40 hours a week, my business is going to fail. My little soloist business is going to fail. And I can tell you that when I sort of stopped with the hourly thing, one of the unexpected things that happened for me was just my stress level went down. Like the fact that I'm sitting here right now talking to you guys, it's 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon. Yep. I'm not getting paid for this. It's, I'm not looking at the time. It's like the meter's running, right? I'm not losing money here because it is just such, like you said, it's a mind shift. It's a very positive thing. It's scary first, and I'd be lying if I said that I've completely figured it out. I still have one client that has me kind of on a retainer. I'm hoping that, that changes over the next couple months. And that's, probably a whole other episode too of like, how do you transition your client base that has always thought of you as, hey, he bills by the hour. And now I'm going back to them and saying, hey, we can do this one by the project and here's how much it's going to cost. Right. So far, it's been very successful. The challenge has been getting them to narrow and stick to a scope. And so, if there is a part two, maybe we can talk a little about that.
Yeah, I don't know when this is going to come out, but if people could write in and contact you guys and be like, oh, more about this, that, or the other, I'd come on again for sure. No problem.
Well, I know that, Eric, you want to wrap it up real quick, but I wanted to ask you 2 personal questions real quick.
Yeah.
One is, we talked about how you went from being a FileMaker developer to kind of what you're doing now. Do you ever miss the technical side of all this? Is there ever a time where you want your fingers on the keys and knocking out code? Or
a little bit, yeah. But I sort of get those jollies writing stuff for my own business. So it's almost like I get to do the same thing as I did when I was doing client work, but I'm the client. And I get the direct benefit of either automating something tedious that I don't want to do anymore, or I get some beneficial outcome, increased profits or revenue or whatever. Yeah. And so I'm still a cowboy coder with PHP on a LAMP server.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
I opted out with React. I taught a couple of React classes. I was like, I hate this. It's great. I just don't like it. It feels like writing an iOS app to me. It's like, I don't want this much configuration.
It'd be awesome to pick your brain sometime and get your thoughts on where technology is today versus 10 years ago.
AI, man, it's changing things.
Yeah, for sure. Another subject for the next time we have you on. One last thing I want to ask you about, and I don't really even need you for you to answer it, but maybe in one of your podcasts or one of your daily emails, maybe it'll spark some idea in your mind. I was listening to an interview that Philip Morgan did with you. It's back from 2021.
Must be pretty
good. It was awesome. Yeah, it was a few years back. And in it, you said something along the lines of every 10 years, you start to get bored. And I thought that's like the 10-year itch. Like I started to work back and look at the dates of like when I think you really started down this journey. And I feel like you're maybe due. And I'm just... again, you don't have to answer now, but I'm just wondering, like, is your mind going there? And do you
definitely, yeah.
Well, I'm curious to see where you end up next.
Right. It's not 100% clear, but I've got some candidates. But if you or listeners want to hear more about that, like how I pivoted, how I executed those pivots from what they were every decade or so, I did a presentation to a group of FileMaker people about just that, and it's on YouTube. So if you I guess my channel is called The Jonathan Stark Show, I think. And so if you Google for me on YouTube, there is a talk about that. I can't tell you the title, but maybe you could put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Email me.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll have
we could go forever asking you questions, but I'll let you wrap it up, Eric. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll put a bunch of links to a lot of your resources in the show notes for sure. But Jonathan, where's the best place for people to go if they want to get in touch, start following what you're doing?
Yeah, for this audience, I'm going to recommend my Sunday comic. So I would go to ditcherville.com, and there's a link on the page to view the comics, and you can just scan through them on my website. If you want to join my mailing list, and that's the way to get in touch with me for sure. Yeah, that's the way to go. But I think this audience is going to laugh their heads off at the comic. They're going to be like, "Oh,
for sure, so I love the comics." Yeah,
cool.
And
they're funny and painful at the same time.
Exactly. Oh, they're not painful for me anymore. But yeah, I know the pain though. All right. I think I will bring this episode to a close. So Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Greatly appreciate it.
Let's definitely do a part 2.
Yeah. I'll send you a link very shortly to schedule that.
Great.
All right. Thanks, so guys. If you out there would like to get in touch with any of us, you can find all that information in the show notes. And we hope you join us next time as we highlight interesting stories from the SuiteScript world. And we'll see you then.